Hey folks, Johnny here from Jonny Lipsham Studios.co.uk. I'm actually just running about 3 or so minutes late. I do apologize. I'm just getting set up here. So just bear with me just a wee minute whilst I do that. And then we'll get started. So let's just do that. And let's do that. Start. I need to mute that. And I need to overlay that. There we go, and move that up a bit. All right, we are live. There are 3 people in the room, which is always a good start. Welcome, welcome, welcome. As I say, I'm just getting started. I'm just getting set up. I've got my other crappy laptop down here, which I'm just going to get onto the stream as well, so that I can monitor the chat when I'm using Studio One. Just draw out a little bit further, see if that helps. No, that's not going to help. I thought it would. And there goes my fader port. Joy. So who's here? Let me know if you're in. Say hello. Post something in the chat. Okay, I'm just going to close a whole bunch of these because they're going to take ages to try and load up on my laptop, which is phenomenally slow. It has to be the world's slowest laptop. So I'm going to change that to YouTube. There we go. I'm just waiting for folks to come and join now because it is 5 minutes past 10 p.m. in Scotland. So we should be up and running. The other thing I forgot to do is I forgot to mute the audio on this. Let's do that first. There we go. Okay, oh, hey, Karmic. How you doing? That's cool. You're here. Excellent. So we got 4 people. I'm still just getting myself sorted. Sorry, I'm running just a hair late today. So I do apologize. Make sure that this is set to the correct quality. Yeah, make sure your stream quality is set to 720. For whatever reason, it might have defaulted to 144, so you don't want that. Hey, Don is here and Bobby Booth, ever dependable Bobby Booth. Live streaming would be no fun without you here, Bobby. So I appreciate it. Okay, I've got that set up. Awesome, 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 awesome. So we have a few people in the room. And we're just going to get underway. Now, please let me know what audio and picture quality are like. Bear in mind, we are at the mercies of my really rather crappy internet. So we're going to have to bear that in mind. So demoing in Studio One might be a no-go if the quality is no good. So it might just have to be questions only. But yeah, I'm going to try my best. So let me know how it's looking, folks. Good to go, pic and audio. Great. Thank you, Mick. Appreciate it. I'm just checking my laptop to see what it's like over there. Okay, we're not too bad. It's a little on the blurry side, I think. But it looks okay over there, which is good. And Don says, looks fine. Excellent. So Jonny and his wife Denise are on their anniversary dinner tonight. So I figured that tonight would be a good night for me to do a live stream instead. So Mick says he's on his iPhone. Okay, that's cool. iPhone is good. If you've got earbuds, that might be better because you might actually, you know, if we're going to demo stuff in Studio One, then in order to answer questions, then you might find that you get better audio from that rather than just the little speaker on your phone. But we'll see how we go. So we have 7 people in the room, and we are going to get started once we've got a few more people in the room. If you have questions, excuse me. If you have questions, get them up in the chat, and we'll see how we go. MGN Studios is here. Excellent. A little blurry, but definitely works. Yes, it may kind of, quality is going to be a little bit kind of indifferent. Sometimes it's going to be reasonably sharp, and sometimes it's going to be a little blurry, and sometimes it might just totally pixelate over. Make sure that you have your resolution for YouTube set to 720, which is the maximum that I can stream at. I think I said on the last episode, I am using Google Hangouts to do this. It's the only way around that I can get that's stable. I cannot use OBS to do it because I cannot. I don't have fast enough upload speed. So this is the only. I'm basically using Google Hangouts as my encoder. So, yeah, it is what it is. Until such time as I'm able to either get better broadband coming in so that I can get a better upload speed, or such time as we move to a different location. Bobby Booth is celebrating his 15th anniversary also. Well, that's fantastic, mate. Congratulations to you. So what the heck are you doing on my stream? But I get that it's much earlier for you. It's probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock, maybe, depending upon where you are. So yeah, so it's probably not even evening time yet for you. For me, it's 10 o'clock in the evening, and I've had my dinner, and my kids are in bed next door. So, and my wife is doing some exercise. She's doing some training. She's planning to do. She's basically doing training and preparations to eventually run a 5K. So that's what she's working towards. So she's in the lounge on our aging Nintendo Wii doing that at the moment. And I'm in here talking to you lovely people. So if you have questions on mixing, mastering, recording, songwriting, Studio One, bring them. Get them into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. So we have 7 people in the room, hanging steady. If somebody could go post a link to this in the Home Studio Trainer Facebook page so that they know that it's live now, then that would be great. I'd appreciate that. I'm thinking maybe to get a better audience, I might actually start doing these streams a bit more regularly, and also later in the evening, because I know that it's 5 o'clock for you guys, which is, you know, you're either just finished work, or you've just walked in the door from work, or you're, you know, kind of still at work. So I get that 5 p.m. doesn't really work for you folks in the United States. So providing these are popular, we'll get these going a little bit later at night for me. I don't mind doing that. MGN Studios has the first question of the night. He says, I'm using a guitar VST. How do you add reverb without overdoing it? It's a great question. The way I would do it is, whether it's an audio track or a VST, if you're using something like Ampire has a set of hidden stomp boxes. There's a button at the top of it, and you just hit the stomp box button, and it opens up all the stomp boxes that are there. One of those is reverb, and you basically just need to dial the mix knob on there and the amount of reverb, dial those right back to nothing, and then bring them in until you can perceive it. All right, until you just about perceive it, and then play the track in the context of the mix and see how it feels than how it sounds. If you can feel the space provided by the reverb, then you've got it. You've got it just right. AAS drum session is what I use. Cool. Excellent. So if you've got that just directly as a plug-in to your guitar track in Studio One, then you could do a send to an effects channel, plop your reverb on there, and then use your send slider that gives you the amount of pre or post fader send. Adjust that until you've just got a taste of the reverb. Reverb is something that you don't want to do too much of. You don't want to drown something in reverb, which is what your question is to do with. Basically, get it to where it's kind of a little bit over wet, and then pull that slider back. Another thing I would recommend is on your effects channel where you've got your reverb, is I would put a high pass filter, stick the Pro EQ on there, stick a high pass filter on there, and roll it back to, I don't know, somewhere between 150 and 250. So basically you're rolling a lot of the low end out of the reverb, so that you don't build up a lot of muddiness in the reverb. I don't want to use it as an insert on the channel then. Which, your VST or the reverb? If it's the reverb, I would suggest not. I would suggest using an effects channel, personally. However, there is a little caveat. If you are wanting a specific reverb for this specific VST, and you're not going to use that same reverb for anything else in your mix, then yes, put it on as an insert, because it's something that you're doing just for this one instance. But generally speaking, I would say use an effects channel, because then, if you like the sound of that particular reverb and you like the space that it has, then you could put other guitars to that same reverb, so that the guitars have this, the same sense of space in the mix. That's what I would suggest. But yeah, you could put it on as an insert if you're only using that reverb for that particular channel. Generally speaking, I say no. Use the effects channel, because it saves on CPU, it saves on RAM usage, because you've only got the one instance of the reverb, and you've got like maybe a whole bunch of different tracks going to that same thing. It depends what your plan is. If you're only going to use that reverb just for that guitar, then yeah, sure, put it on as an insert. Al Key is here. He says, hey folks, sorry I'm a bit late today. Don't worry about that. I'm a little bit late getting started. So MGN says, so I need to roll off the low end with an EQ. That's my problem, is the muddiness. Yeah, use the low cut filter on the Pro EQ directly on the effects channel that you've got your reverb on. This is what is really cool about using the effects channel as opposed to having it as an insert, because you can do this. You can put the EQ after the reverb on the effects channel to get a lot of the low end out of your mix, out of your reverb rather. So particularly if you've got lots of reverb, lots of different reverbs, lots of different delays for different tracks in your mix, there is this way in which it can just build up mud and clutter, and then you start going to your individual channels and you start EQing them like crazy, and you end up messing up your mix, when really the issue is to do with how much mud is building up in your effects channels. Okay, so high pass filter those delays and those reverbs, because really you don't need low end in an effects, my opinion. Because the best part of the reverb effect, what is going to be perceived by your listener, is going to be anything from sort of the low mids and up. That's what's going to be perceived. That's what's going to be heard. So you don't need low end frequencies going through your reverb, particularly, which is incidentally why I never run a bass guitar through a reverb. I just don't do it for that very reason. So there you go. Hope that helps. Any other questions? So we have 9 people watching. That's great. Fantastic. The more the merrier. Yeah, or a kick drum. Yeah. Yeah, I just would not run a kick drum through a reverb. Possibly through a delay if I'm doing reggae, maybe. Like for just like an event effects. If I want a particular, that kind of delay effect that you sometimes hear in some one drop reggae tracks, like Ziggy Marley, he uses delays on snare drums quite a bit. So yeah, but other than that, no, I wouldn't use a reverb on a kick drum or a bass guitar. Any other questions? I realize there is a bit of a delay between me talking to you and the chat, so I'm having to bear that in mind as well. So if you could, to speed things along, stick your questions in quick and early. That way we get, there are less pauses and less stops here. So Don Hammer says, I use delay more than reverb on just about everything. Reverb is a mysterious plugin. Yeah, reverb can trip you up seriously. You can end up very quickly overusing it, and then you end up with a mix that's just totally drowned in reverb, and it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult to do that. So yeah, I tend to use more delays than reverb, mostly because I think I prefer kind of a drier, more natural sound to my mixes than lots of reverbs. Although I know mix engineers who work in R&B where lots of reverbs are used, and again, it's how you handle it with care that makes it effective. Al says, in the new version of Studio One 3.5, I'm trying to figure out how to use the volume automation in the project page, but not having any luck. I would say that is probably because in the project page, you mean the mastering project page, or do you mean the song page? We have to be careful with definitions of terms here. The project page is the mastering part of Studio One Professional. The song page is where you have all of your guitar tracks, vocal tracks, drum tracks, bass tracks, horns, strings, what have you. And it's in the song page where you can do volume automation. As far as I'm aware, you cannot as yet do volume automation in the mastering page, as far as I know. Skip Jones is here, and he is an absolute legend. And if I'm incorrect on that, he will correct me, and I will gladly receive it. You thought this was a new addition to it? As far as I know, not as yet. Would not be to me at all a surprise if the developers are working on it, though. MGN says, I also shared links to the HST page and the Persona Studio One page. Awesome. Thanks, mate. Appreciate that. And Bobby says, skip. And I not only say skip, I say skip with a chord. There you go, Skip. That's your chord, which is horrendously distorted. I'll try that again. A nice clean chord. There you go. Skip. That's your chord. Which is horrendously distorted. I'll try that again. A nice clean chord. go. Skips chords. Okay, so any further questions? I'm having a look over on here to see what we got. Yeah, as far as I know, the mastering page does not have volume automation on it. At least not yet. Scroll to 22 minutes 14. I cannot, when I'm streaming, scroll back in time, unfortunately, but I can skip up the chat. I'm looking to see if you have a question. I don't see one, Mick. I'm not seeing one. If you posted it, could you copy paste it back into the chat so that we are up to speed? Have we frozen, by the way? Or I hope not. You put one about MIDI. Well, I've just scrolled right the way up the chat, and I don't think I can see it. Let me see if I can find it. The last thing I have here from you, Mick, is that you said you're on an iPhone. And you congratulated Bobby on his wedding anniversary. No, I'm not seeing a question about MIDI, I'm afraid, Mick. Apologies. Sorry about that. But yeah, feel free to post it again. Speaking of MIDI, MIDI Drums Made Easy Volume 2 is in post-production, folks. So it is not going to be long before this little puppy is up for sale over at homerecordingmadeeasy.com in the Made Easy product line. Volume 1 went really well, sold very nicely. I was very pleased with it and very pleased with how well it's received. So Volume 2 takes some of the basics that you learn in Volume 1 and we go into a little bit more depth, we go into a little bit more detail, and we add some techniques that are going to make your grooves really, really groove. And your drum fills are going to sound delicious with some of the things that you're going to learn in Volume 2. So I will be announcing with David Vignola when that is going to be released. I need to talk to him, and he needs a pre-screening before we go ahead with it. So there you go. Lupax Records is here. Awesome. Mid-side technique with splitter and mix tool might be something the folks can benefit from. I would agree. I will confess that mid-side processing is not really something that I do. Never really had a need to do it, particularly with the music that I work in mostly. Most of the work that I do is in jazz or acoustic music. So folk music, classical music, and that kind of thing. So I don't really have a need to do any mid-side, to be honest. So, and it's been a very, very long time since I've done any. So I think the way that it's done nowadays is probably quite different from the way that it was done when I was in the early part of my Cubase days, which is probably when I last did it. So we're talking maybe, I don't know, 15 or so years ago was maybe the last time I did any mid-side. So sorry about that. Yeah, you find it helpful for overheads. Yeah, I suppose you might. But as I say, not really something I do. Okay, Skip says the Presonus 1602 USB announced today, and it is on their site already. Yes, I saw the video for it this afternoon. It looks really, really cool. And it's a very, very nice little upgrade for the 1602 Classic. That's very cool. Okay, here we go from Mick. The timing on MIDI is before the beat, even though I played to the beat. I changed millisecond settings in MIDI, but no change. Okay, are you running through the low latency monitoring path in Studio One 3.5? That would be my first question to you. Do you have the green Z? If you go into Studio One, in fact, maybe this should be the first thing that I show you in Studio One. So if you just bear with me just 1 second whilst I get it going. And then I will share my screen. And I'll show you where this is. If you don't know, you probably do already because, you know, it's been a wee while since it launched. So let me see. What have I got that's got? Here we go. Let's use this, my 3.5 demo song. Alrighty, 3.5 demo song. Do I have any instrument tracks on this? Yes, I do, the tenor sax. Okay, let me just share my screen through Google Hangouts. I have to do everything through Google Hangouts. Screen share. Okay. So hopefully you will be able to see my screen now. Hopefully. What you might need to do, folks, at this point is click the little cogwheel and make sure that it's set to 720p. This is something that happens when I share my screen. The resolution goes down ridiculously. So if you change it to 720, you should see this at 720p. So make sure you do that for me, please. Mick says, I'm not. Do I need to be? It will help. Okay, I'm looking at, oh, it looks pretty good. Looks pretty good on my laptop. All right, so I'll show you how this is done. If you go over here to this little tab here and click this out, and then you click the instrument tab here, and this brings up this here. If you have the green Z here, then your instrument, whatever it is, in this case it's the presence, is going through the low latency monitoring path, which means I will get less latency when I'm recording through presence. Okay, so let me get my aging MIDI keyboard switched on to help with this, and it'll just take a few seconds for it to warm up. It is about 25 years old, this keyboard, which you can't see because you're looking at my screen just now. But it's one of those Yamaha QS300 keyboards that came out in 1994. And yes, it still works. It works pretty well. The only thing that doesn't work on it is the disk drive, which is a shame because it's a workstation. So I had like mock-ups and stuff saved on those little 3.5-inch floppy disks, if you remember those. So that the disk drive doesn't work anymore, and that's mostly because in about 1997, on the way to a gig, it flew out of the back of a van on the way to a gig. Somehow the door came undone, and this was on what I guess you'd call it a freeway in America. Here we call it a motorway. And doing about 80 miles an hour down the road, keyboard fell out onto the motorway. We pulled in onto the hard shoulder, and I had to get out of the car and leg it up the road with cars passing me at 80, 90 miles an hour to rescue the keyboard before it got run over by a truck. And it survived. It still works. So there you go. There's the story. Bobby says, see it. Excellent. So you can see Studio One. So yeah, you need this green Z. So if I was to create a new track, if I close all of that out, and close my mixer, and we'll just bring in presence on a new track. That's fine. So let's go to presence and drag one in, and we will go for a flugelhorn. I like flugelhorns. Flugelhorns are a beautiful instrument. If you don't know what a flugelhorn is, it's a brass instrument, kind of like a trumpet, except the coiling of the brass of the body of the instrument is much more open, and the bell of the horn is a little bit bigger than that of a trumpet, and that's what gives it its warm sound, which we're not hearing because I've not clicked the monitor button. Okay, tell me if you can hear that. Hopefully you can. Otherwise, this demonstration is going to be completely rendered useless. Okay, let me know in the chat if you can hear me playing the keyboard. Hopefully you can. I will press on because I know there's a delay. So now that I've got this sound open, let's go back to the mixer, and I'm going to turn off this low latency monitoring path. I don't know if you can hear me if I press really hard on the keys. You can hear the key clack, and then you get the sound generated after it. So there's quite a latency there. Yeah, that would be unplayable. I just couldn't play on a track if it was like that. So what we need is this guy on, and when it's on, it's pretty much near instantaneous. So if you've got that little green Z or Z, whatever you want to call it, here we call it Z, you guys call it Z. I don't always agree with the way American English is developed from British English, but in this case, you win. Z makes much more sense to me than Z. So it's pretty much instantaneous with the green Z on. Okay, so I hope that helps, Mick. If you could post and let me know if that's helpful or not, I'd appreciate that. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen just now. So you need to again check that cogwheel for me, please. And we should be back to normal. I should be able to go back to my stream and there we go. Okay. Okay, so I hope that was helpful, Mick, if you're still here. So I would suggest get that little green Z lit up for your low latency monitoring path for the instruments, and hopefully it'll improve the timing of it for you. It sounds to me like it's a latency issue, but give that a try, and if you find that it's still, excuse me, if you still find that it's a problem, then let me know. Maybe we can hook up over Skype and see if we can fix that for you. Okay, great, you're going to try that. Cool. Okay, any other questions? We've been going for 37 minutes. We have 13 people in the room. Peter asks, what's your favorite coloring of the 251? Pink, green, and yellow? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Especially as I'm one of those rare people in the world, of which there are, I think there's only 2% of the population of the entire world that is completely colorblind. I am one of the 2% that's completely colorblind. My world is a sepia world, so colors are kind of a little bit meaningless to me, which is why I was perfectly happy with the look of Studio One version 2. because all the colors just don't bother me at all. I don't need it colorful. Okay, let me just take a little pause for a drink of tea. There we go. I have to be careful not to drop that on my laptop. Yeah, so Peter, if you could maybe expand on that question. Maybe it's a Swedish word. You mean you mean extra notes to the chords. So you mean extensions to chords. There's an interesting question. If you are into jazz, like I am, then you are probably familiar with adding ninths, sharp 11s, 13s, and all that kind of stuff to dominant chords and minor seventh chords. 251 would be in the key of C. That would be D minor, G7 to C. So that would be your basic 251, which is great for ending a song, by the way, or ending a section of a song. But it's also really, really useful for changing key. So I just did one in E flat there. Let's do one in G. Oh, sorry. A minor, D7, G. So the 251s are phenomenally useful little chord progressions. If you don't know what we mean by 251, if that is an entire mystery to you and you're going, whoa, 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 hold on a minute, what do you mean 251? What's that all about? Well, I did a little video on that, if you care to go and find it, where I forget what I titled it now, because I did it maybe a couple of years ago. And basically I covered chord changes and changing key. That's what it was. I did two videos, two-part video on how to change key, how to go from one key to any other key. And basically, to summarize, we call 251s because we take a major scale or a minor scale, depending on if you're in a major or minor key, and you number them 1 to 8. So you go, if we're in C major, then 1 is going to be C, 2 is going to be D, 3 is E, 4 is F, 5 is G, 6 is A, 7 is B, and then C is the octave, so it's still 1. Okay, so you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Okay? So when we say 251, we mean a 2, which would be a D, a G, going to 1. So because we have a major scale in the key of C, then if we start building triads, which is what most chords are built out of, there's a C major triad. If we go shift that up 1 to the next note in the scale, now we've got D minor, E minor, F, G major, A minor, and then this funny one, which is a half diminished chord, which is basically built on minor thirds, which resolves nicely up to the C. Okay, so that's a 251. And what Peter is asking is, what notes do I like to add to a basic major seventh, minor seventh, or dominant seventh chord type? I like to add ninths to minor chords, or 11ths. There's D minor 9. Or sometimes I'll voice it this way. I'll have, there's the minor third, there's the 7th, and there's the 11th right next door to it. I like this voicing. And it's very, very movable. So, for example, I would do something like D minor 11, and then I'd do G13 to C major 7 sharp 11. I quite like that. Lupax likes D minor 11. He likes G13 as well, and then C major 13. Yeah, I quite like that as well. And you can voice that in. But if you're not into jazz, then a lot of that's not really going to be too super important to you. If you're playing rock music, you probably don't need those kind of chords. That's beautiful with the high E on top. Yeah, it is. do something like this. You could even do a tritonal substitution. Instead of playing G7, you play D flat 7. So yeah, 7 with a sharp 11, always very nice. Okay, 14 people in the room now. That's cool. And we've been going 44 minutes. So that was Peter's harmony question. That's very cool. Any other questions? Lupax, you really do know your harmony, don't you, mate? Also minor 251. Oh, okay, I'll do minor 251 as well. Now, minor chords. Minor scale, that's the harmonic minor scale. Melodic minor scale, sorry. The harmonic minor. So, in this instance, instead of chord 2 being a minor chord, like it was when we're in C major, instead of 2 being minor, because 1 is minor, then 2 becomes this weird little thing. Here, I'll show you. So if I move all of that up 1, then we get a half diminished chord. So you get you can do half D, half diminished, and then G7 flat 9. And you can do the James Bond thing as well in a minor key. So maybe Bond is dead, I don't know. So yeah, so and on the Fender Rhodes, in this voicing, it sounds really dark. There's G7 sharp 5, resolving to the darkest of darkest minor chords. So hope everybody feels suitably funeraled up after that. Yeah, Lupax, you really seem to know your chord changes, man. That's cool. Like it. Okay, 15 people in the room. Welcome, 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 all the new watchers. Yeah, you like 7 with flat 9 on the 5. Yeah, that's nice. So we have 15 people in the room. Welcome all those that are just joining us. Say hello. I won't bite. If you're new to the live stream, then just pop in and say hello on the chat. We're a welcoming crowd here. So if I have not seen your name before, that is extremely cool that you have come to join me. Thank you. Love it. Any more questions to do with mixing, mastering, recording, piano playing, harmony, songwriting? We can cover it all. Within reason, obviously. Hey, Miles is here. Miles McConaughey. Hello, mate. How are you? Good to see you. So, that's 15 people in the room, and we've been going 47 minutes. And we've covered, so far, we've covered MIDI questions to do with MIDI latency and how you solve that using the low latency monitoring path in Studio One. We've covered some harmony questions, how you do chord extensions to both minor and major 251s, which is cool. What else do we look at? Oh, mid-side processing, which I don't really do. MJN Studios had a great question about reverbs and how to not overdo reverbs. You know what, MJN Studios, if you're still here, I'm very glad you've asked that question. Because a lot of mixers, when they're starting out, the thing they tend to do most is they tend to overdo the use of ambient effects. Or there's basically too much low end in the mix. That's the so those are kind of like your common beginner traits is you know, the music is a bit drenched in delays and reverbs when it doesn't need to be, or there's too much low mid build up or low end build up. Peter asks, how do you feel about ragtime piano playing? I don't play it, so I don't know. There you go. However, I have heard some fantastic piano players like Fats Waller. He was a swing player, but he also had a fantastic stride pattern. Also, if you've ever heard of a guy called Art Tatum, who had a profound influence upon one of my great influences, which is Charlie Parker, the alto sax player. Art Tatum could play stride piano at about 320 beats a minute. If you don't know what stride piano is where you play bass notes down at the bottom and you chord with the same hand. So your hand is doing this it's going from the bass to the middle, bass chord, bass chord, bass chord, bass chord, which frees up your right hand for improvising. Art Tatum could do that at 300 beats a minute without breaking a sweat and without missing a note. Art Tatum was a genius, and he was blind in one eye. I think he was blind in one eye and partially blind in the other. So it's just phenomenal, extraordinary. Bobby Booth asks, do you have to have contact for Notion? As far as I know, you do not have to have contact for Notion. I believe that Notion does come with some sounds. It comes with it. But there are also sound sets that you can get from Presonus. In fact, unless I'm very much mistaken, Skip, if you are still here, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that there is still a 30% sale on the Notion sound packs. If you're still here, correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, you just need to go to the Presonus shop and you'll see all of that there. MGM says, I do both, but I'm improving. Well, you know what? You asked the right question. How do I not overdo it? It's exactly right. So you're on the right lines with reverb if you're asking those kind of questions. Anybody else got a question? We're going to run for maybe another 10, 15 minutes. I try to use the chorder, says Mick, when writing a song, but I don't understand how it works. Could you explain it? I'm not trained on music theory. The chorder. Okay, let's take a look. You know what? I think I've only ever used it maybe once. So I will be learning at the same time as you. And I certainly have never used it as a songwriting tool. Okay, so let me go ahead and share the screen. You know what to do. You need to change the resolution again, please, folks. So I hit share, and then I go back to Studio One. And then we go back to the start page. I'm just going to check my laptop and make sure that you can see this. I'm going to create a new song. Let me know if you can see Studio One. I'm looking over at the chat. Lupac says the mandolin add-on is nice. Yeah, I've heard it is. I've heard it's really nice. Have we frozen? I just want to check. Okay, you should be able to see Studio One now. Great. Okay, the chorder. Where the heck is the chorder? See, it's been a long time since I've used it, so I'm not entirely sure where it is. Where is the chorder? Is it Note Effects? Ah, that's where it is. It's in Note Effects. Now, I'm not really sure how this works. Oh, you have to have an instrument track open first, don't you? Of course you do. Of course you do. Let's get presence open and let's, just for fun and frolics, let's go for nylon strung full on guitar. Yeah, note effects. Thank you, MGN. Yeah, I've got that. I'd forgotten you need to actually have an instrument open fast to do it. So let's just check. I love the sound of that nylon guitar. Okay, so note effects. And I think it's just as simple as adding that onto there. Don't really know how it works. Let's go for chord types. Let's go for... What should we go for? Major sevenths. Don't know how this works. Oh, that's how it works. Now, can I play this up here? I already love this. This is already a huge amount of fun. So, the chorder, how it works, you have a whole bunch of presets here. So you have some chord types: augmented, diminished, dominant seventh, major, flat 7, add 9, major seventh, minor seventh, sus 4, and then you've got these intervals as well. So let's try this one. Yeah, try playing that on a real guitar, guys. That could be hours of fun. Lupac says Phrygian with major 3rd and 7th is one of my favorites. Really? I don't think that comes as a default here, does it? Chord groups, what do we have? Oh, diatonic major chord, rock chord groups, neo soul, intervals. Yeah. I don't think you have that. You can probably set it up to do that. You can probably set it up to any chord types you really want, but these are probably the most useful. I would suggest like minor 7th if you wanted to write in a minor key. All right, so that's basically how it works. Hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, probably, of endless fun and frolics. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, so change the resolution again, guys. And we're back to the stream. Okay, what did I miss on the chat there? Okay, Peter says hang on, Phrygian with major 3rd and 7th, same with the chart. Yeah. Peter says, my favorite thing to do with the chorder is the preset EDM melody over a straight 4 to the floor beat and pretend I'm a world famous DJ producer. Yeah. Mick says, I've been using it to get a song, i.e. one chord moving on in progression to the next chord. Well, that's an interesting use of the tool. If it's working for you, then that's fantastic, Mick. Skip, who is still here, awesome. on the reverse, I can play some funky keyboard using my Fishman triple play MIDI controller. Awesome. Okay. Al says, back to the question on volume automation project screen. Well, you are correct. It does not exist as in the song page, but it can be done sort of by splitting the audio into several chunks and editing the volume envelope for each separately. Yes, you can do that, and you can maintain that being part of the one song as well, which is definitely, that aspect of it is definitely new in Studio One. Why, you may ask, do I want to do this? You probably want to do something like increase the volume of the chorus of a song, give it a little lift. So you're giving the choruses a little lift compared to the verses, which is a common little mastering technique. Lipak says one can use coda and arpeggio at the same time. Well, that's cool. I'll have to give that a try. Al goes on to say, because if I get a WAV file from a client that could be improved by lifting the chorus, this is a way I can add some level. Yes. That is definitely a way to do it. Another thing you can do is you could open a new song in the song page, match the BPM of your new song in the song page, bring in your stereo WAV of the song that you are mastering, and you could do the automation there, print it, send the printed version to the project page, and then continue with mastering. You could do it that way as well. And probably it kind of looks tidier, less chops. So there you go. So that's one way you can do it until such time as volume automation is brought into the project page. If you haven't done so already, go and put that in the feature request thread in the Presonus forum. I recommend you do that. Have a look to see if it's already there. If it is, give it a vote up. Okay? Because the developers really do listen, and they really do take a look at the feature request thread. And I'm absolutely certain they get a lot of ideas for what goes into new versions of Studio One from that feature request forum thread. So go ahead and do that. Alki says, yes, great idea. Yeah, there you go. That might actually work better for you, because you can be a little bit more precise rather than having to cut up your song in the project page and do clip gain. You can be more precise over your fades and that kind of stuff in the song page, and then print it and chuck it over to the project page. That's a really great question, Noel. And Mick, yeah, I really like the coda as well. I'm going to have hours of fun with that, I'm sure, when I get off this stream. In fact, I might just go and make an EDM record. In fact, I might just use the coda kind of like in an EDM style, and then put some nice, sparkly Fender Rhodes over the top, this kind of stuff. I might go and chuck all that kind of stuff on it. And my wife is just sending me a message on Facebook. That's cool. Thank you. Peter says, oh, sorry, skipping up. Karmic says, when you bounce to project page, why does the project page automatically add loudness to the track? As far as I know, it does not do that. I have never had it do that, for sure. Unless you have the limiter set on the master of the project page. Peter says, I arrived a bit late, so maybe you've already mentioned it, but when you and Jonny Gibe air the songwriting, will you and Mr. Gibe air the songwriting Wednesday tonight? No, we will not, Peter. The reason being is that Jonny and his wife have their 25th wedding anniversary today. So they are they're going to be going out for dinner tonight. So, and Skip's just said exactly the same thing. Yes. So he's having a well-earned and well-deserved night off with his missus. So you got me instead. You drew the short straw. However, as Bobby Booth correctly points out, Jonny and I will be on tomorrow for our Songwriting Thursday instead of Songwriting Wednesday. And we've got some cool things that we're going to go through. I know Jonny kind of said that we're going to kind of just wing it and be off the cuff. Well, we are and we aren't. We've got some great ideas for the show tomorrow. Mick says, mine does. Lupax then suggests check if you don't have bypass master effects on export checked or unchecked, depending. That's a great suggestion. It might be if you have the limiter on your master fader in the song page, when you export, if you don't have that that bypass checkbox checked in the export song dialog, then you might well find that the limiter is adding the loudness on the way to the project page. That could be where it is. Doug Lyons is here. Doug from Caledonia Sound and Recording Studio. Awesome. Great to have you here, Doug. This is only my second live stream, so I'm sure the quality and the content of this stream will get better and better. Okay, Mick says, I'll try that. Cool. Let me know how you get on with that, Mick. Don't be afraid to send me a PM on Facebook and let me know how that's going for you. And if necessary, we'll hook up on Skype and see if we can get to the bottom of that. AKA Filthy Curve. Yes, you have many names. Filthy Curve. Yes, of course, Doug. Welcome. Glad you could join us. I'm just going to take another break for a swig of tea. Please do talk amongst yourselves for a second. All right. Witness protection. Yeah. In my case, it's not witness protection. I did change my name in 2006. So the name that I go by now is not my real name. But I can't tell you why I changed my name, because I would be breaking the law if I did. And I cannot say any more than that. And now you probably all want to know why. You're probably all curious as heck, but I can't go into that. But I'm sure Doug was just kidding. Queen knows where you are. Yeah, she does. She does. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if she's watching this stream right now, because I know she's into audio stuff. So there you go. Did you not know she's a DJ in her spare time? Yep, DJ Queenie. A rose would smell as sweet, yes. No, seriously, I did genuinely change my name in 2006. Jonny Lipsham is not my real name. As I said, I can't say why. But there we go. Moving swiftly on. Do we have any other questions? Because so far we've had some really fantastic questions on MIDI, on reverbs, on using the Chorder as a songwriting tool, which I think that's a fantastic little idea that you've got going there, Mick. That's a great use of that tool. Yeah, I might well actually try incorporating it myself, because I don't think I've ever really played about with it except when version 3 launched. I think that was probably the first time I actually played about with it and thought, you know what, this is an awesome little tool. So from what I can gather, you can use the chorda and the arpeggio at the same time, and you can layer different instruments as well on at the same time. If you've got the RAM to do it, do it. So Doug says, explain the Studio One mix effects feature. Is it new to 3.5? Mix effects is not new to 3.5. It was introduced, I think, to version 3.2. I think that's correct. Which was when Console Shaper was unveiled at the same time during that launch. And basically, it's a little complicated to explain, but I will try and summarize it into something very simple for you. What Console Shaper does, and therefore the Mix Effects engine, which is its full name. Basically, the Mix Effects engine, when you have it engaged, it replaces the standard Studio One audio engine completely. It completely replaces it. Okay? So when you have the Console Shaper on, in effect, what you have done is you have switched off the standard Studio One audio engine and replaced it with the Console Shaper. The Console Shaper emulates a console. In fact, I think it emulates, depending upon which settings you're using, it emulates maybe one or two different consoles that they use their space state modeling technology to create these models. And essentially what it is it replaces the audio engine entirely. And just like on a real console, you get crosstalk, you can drive the signal harder through the channels to create a little bit of nice harmonic distortion that you get from consoles like Neves and SSLs and APIs and the TG12345. You can get all of that kind of stuff going through those circuits. In particular, SSLs. The SSL console is the one I'm probably most familiar with because it's kind of where I started way back in the 1980s. So essentially, that's what it does. So you need to treat, when you're using the Console Shaper or the soft tube tape in the Mix Effects mode, you need to treat that as a console. In your mind, it's a real console, okay? That way, you're not going to get unstuck. If you complete a mix and then you chuck the Console Shaper on at the end of your mix, it's going to totally screw up your mix and you won't like it at all. You'll get really annoyed and you'll be disappointed with the sound that you get. What you need to do is start with the Mix Effects engine with the Console Shaper in place and mix through it as if you are mixing through a real console. Okay? And then it'll work for you. So you treat it like a real console in your mind. So then Doug then says, so how do you engage the Console Shaper and then go back to the standard audio engine? I can show you that. So I'm going to go back to my screen sharing. You know what to do, folks. Get ready to change that resolution back to 720. I don't know why it does it, but it does. I don't know. Okay, am I sharing? Yes, I'm sharing. So I go back to Studio One. And I'm going to go back to my 3.5 demo song. Now, see, on this song, I did not start with the Mix Effects engine. But when you want to, if you just click this little drop-down arrow and select Console Shaper, this is what comes up. This is the default Console Shaper for the Mix Effects engine. Okay? And these are the default settings. So what I do is I start with them all turned off. and I turn the crosstalk right the way off. So if you are working at the start of your mix, put this on first. Then do your mix. Do your standard gain staging procedures that you do. Set all your buses up, route all your audio, do all of that, then get to mixing with this still in place, okay? So what I would do is I would get this on straight away, do your gain staging, and then start doing a static mix. Before you start moving a single fader or a single pan slider, what I would suggest you do is you set this up to how you want it as the raw audio tracks are playing. Set the drive, the noise, the crosstalk to how you want it. If you don't know what crosstalk is when you have audio in this track, audio in this track, and audio in this track. What happens is you get a little bit of bleed between neighboring channels, which we call crosstalk. Okay, it's just because on an analog console like an SSL, all of the components, all of the wiring and everything else is really, really compact and close and next to each other. So that's where the crosstalk happens. And it was something that was just a byproduct of the design of a console. Not a lot you could do about it. So you lived with it. And it just became part of the character, part of the sound of a mix through an SSL. That's just what happened. So you mixed through it. You mixed with that in place. And then, of course, we have DAWs. And we're mixing in the box. So all of that kind of went out of fashion. We don't want that. We don't want the crosstalk. We don't want a noisy console. We don't want harmonic distortion. We want crisp, clean, super clean, almost sterile mixes. A sterile sound for a sterile digital age. Except now, 15 or so, or 20 or so years after the birth of the DAW, now we're creating plugins and effects engines that emulate the SSL. For example, if I close this, I actually have an SSL on this mix here. And here it is, the SSLE channel. I'm very familiar with this. Not quite so familiar with the way it's kind of laid out side by side, because on a console it would be a straight up and down channel strip. But yes, I'm very familiar with how this works, and I'm very familiar with how it sounds. So now we have consoles in mix effects engines, we have console plugins, we have the virtual console collection from Steven Slate and all of that. And so this is how we end up with mix effects engine. So that was kind of a bit of a long way around to answer the question. But I hope it helped. Let me just take a quick look at the chat on my laptop. Al says it is laughable how we want all those old analog imperfections back into our perfect digital workspace. Yes, totally. Totally, it's hilarious. And he says, I see you have it on all your buses and final mix bus. Why? Because of the mindset of mixing through a console. If you want to go down the whole analog route inside a DAW, then you have to treat the whole thing as an analog environment. Okay? So you need to treat Studio One as if it is an SSL console. If you're going to go down that route. If you're going to have a whole analog kind of vibe going on in your mix, if that's what you want, if that's your objective, if that's the sound signature that you want as mix engineer, you have to treat Studio One as an SSL. Which means every channel has SSL on it. Every bus has SSL on it. Your mix bus has SSL on it. the whole thing has to be decked out with the same thing. Otherwise, it's not going to be completely right. Okay. So some people will say, well, I have an SSL because I have an SSL E channel like this because I like the sound of the EQ and the compressor on it. Well, that's great, but don't just treat it as just an EQ and a compressor. Don't just treat it as, like you would the Studio One channel strip or the Fat channel, because it's different. The Mix Effects engine is not just a plugin that sits on the top of the audio engine like the VCC or any of the other console-y type things that are around and about that you can get. I mean, the VCC, the Virtual Console Collection from Stephen Slate, that sits on top of the default Studio One audio engine. Whereas things like the Console Shaper and the Persona CTC1, they do not sit on top of anything. They replace the Studio One audio engine. Okay? The VCC doesn't. But you can use the VCC to give your digital sound an analog veneer. But if you're using the Mix Effects engine, then it's analog all the way. Okay, hope that helps. Let me see. Skip Jones says Studio One Mix Effects was 3.2 and changing video from QuickTime was 3.3. Yes, that's right. Thanks, Skip. Alki says, why not just on the final mix bus? Again, for the same reason. It's all about, if you're going to have an analog sound for your mix, you have to have all analog. Otherwise, you're just sitting analog on top of a digital mix, which to me, it would not be faithfully analog. You're just getting a little bit of analog color. It's like, if Van Gogh had chosen, when he was thinking about creating the painting of the Fallen Madonna, when he started that painting, he started out with his regular palette of colors and his canvas. Okay? He didn't then decide that he was going to have a little bit of canvas, a little bit of card, a little bit of wood, a little bit of something else. It was all one medium, canvas. And again, he didn't mix his, when he had his palette was oil paints. He didn't have oil paints, acrylics, crayons, biro. That would look pretty, well, it wouldn't be Van Gogh, would it? Van Gogh used oil paints and he used canvas primarily. So for me, it's the same thing. If I'm mixing for an analog sound, then the whole thing has to be analog. Okay, let's see. Peter says, I got a bit lost. To recap, first console shaper, then gain stage, static, and so forth. Yes. Pass-through versus not. We need a refresher on that. Yeah, pass-through. We are at 22 minutes past 11. But you know what? I think I will maybe do a video on that. Okay? I'll actually do a separate screen capture video on that subject. Al says, Peter, I would gain stage first. You know what? I would just switch on the console shaper and then gain stage. Don't even adjust the settings in the console shaper. Just switch it on. Okay? That way you're doing everything in the analog mindset of Studio One is an SSL, including gain staging. Al says, I want my clip game to be optimized before anything. Yeah. Okay, so you guys are just chatting about that. Skip says, like having 1/8 an analog mixer spliced to 7/8 of a digital mixer, unnatural. Exactly. Okay, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to come back to you guys over in the stream. Okay. So I hope that whole discussion on MixFX Engine was helpful and useful. So Peter says, okay, I guess I'll have to try it and see what fits me then. Yeah, pretty much. Experiment with what sounds best to you. But essentially, the general rule of thumb, if there is a rule, if there are rules to mixing, and really there probably aren't, but I would say for the sake of the integrity of your mix and the integrity of your sound, as Skip says, you've got to start from A to B in your mix, analog, if you're going to go for an analog vibe. Alrighty. Any other questions? Because that was a great one. That was a huge question, and I hope I've done it justice. In fact, I'm going to need a little bit more of a tea break. We have 13 people in the room, and it is coming up on 25 past 11. So we've been going for nearly an hour and a half. So I am going to maybe go for 5 more minutes, and then we'll bring this thing to an end. So any more questions? But yeah, MixFX Engine. It's a massive deal, and I'm not entirely sure that everybody really has fully understood the whole thing of how the MixFX Engine switches off the Studio One audio engine. Al says, thanks guys for all your awesome inputs. I got to head out to work now. Al, you go and have a great shift at work. And I will talk to you soon, mate. Thanks for coming. That's very cool. So this has been a really good stream, guys. The questions have been fantastic. And we've had a consistent, somewhere between 13 and 15 people in the room. Doug says, what is the general going rate to charge for mixing supplied tracks from a client for us beginner to intermediate home studio mixers? So what is the general going rate to charge for mixing for a client? That's a massive question, but it's a good one. I would say if you are in that beginner intermediate bracket and you've done a few mixes, I would say if you're looking to land your first client, the first thing you need to do, and I think George Pinto, our good buddy over in the Home Studio Trainer Studio One support group, I think over on the Persona Studio One group, I think there was a thread on this, and George answered that question excellently, in my opinion. I would suggest that probably the first thing you need to do is you need to build up a portfolio of work that shows your capabilities as a mix engineer. So you probably need to maybe go to things like open mic nights and talk to artists there who are performing, and offer to record them and mix them for free. The reason you do that is not so that you just become the guy that does everything for free, but what you do is you build up a body of work, and you also build up a bit of a reputation in your local community. You know, songwriters, musicians, artists in your city if you work with them, you do a great job, even if you're doing it for free, they will come back to you and they'll start talking about you. And that is how you get your business. It's not through Facebook ads. It's not through Google ads or AdSense or anything like that. It's through the best form of advertising, which is word of mouth. Start building up a body of work, start working with people, start getting yourself out there and you know, getting known in your local music scene. And before you know it, you'll have people wanting to come back that you've worked with, wanting to come back. And build yourself a website. And even if the website is just a placeholder for you to put your portfolio of work, your body of work, then you can start thinking about charging. And what I would say is, when you're thinking about setting your rates, think about what you think your talent is worth. Think about how much time you invest in a mix for a client when you've worked for free. And if you're like most people, you've also got a regular day job. So you could probably work out what your regular day job's hourly rate is. Even if you're salaried monthly, you could probably work out what your regular hourly rate is at your work. Then you can work out how many hours you've invested in a mix for a client. Well, then you can work out how much you think you should charge to start with. And then what I would say is regularly increase your rates. Okay? Maybe at the end of every financial year, put your rates up a little bit. Because hopefully at the end of that year, you've got better as a mix engineer. Okay? So I hope that helps, Doug. Peter says, this is really helpful and interesting to me. I'm not calling anybody old, but when I first got in contact with music recording, it was already digital. Never really got to know the analog stuff. Yeah, well, you know what? That's cool. That's absolutely cool. And Bobby says, what's the difference in console shaper between the console shaper and the CTC1? The CTC1 does not come as standard with Studio One. You have to purchase it. I believe it is a shade under $80 at the moment in a Persona shop. I think that's right. It's the CTC1 has more consoles modeled, and it has some more options and some more controls that the console shaper does not have. Console shaper is basically just the first baby steps, I guess, in this whole analog console modeling technology that Presonus have been developing. So it's kind of baby steps towards a much bigger, much better thing, which is the CTC1. And then, of course, at the Studio One 3.2 launch, they talked about other companies, third-party companies that are going to develop their version, their brand of plugins for the Mix Effects engine. So they talked about Softtube, they talked about Stephen Slate, and they talked about Audio Technica. And so with the Softtube tape that's available now, they are the first of those manufacturers to get involved with the Mix Effects engine. So I'm hopeful that Stephen Slate will come up with a version of the VCC specifically for the Mix Effects engine. That would be very, very cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Audio Technica come up with. So there you go. Okay, we are just after 11:30 p.m. in Edinburgh, Scotland. So I am going to draw this to a close. I would like to thank you all very much for coming, all 12 to 15 of you that have been here. That's cool. I'm loving, I'm really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying answering your questions and really enjoying getting started with live streaming. So hopefully we can build this up into something better. And hopefully I will get better at doing these and it'll get a little bit slicker. And then, as I say, eventually, hopefully, I will have better internet and we can use OBS and it'll all be nice and all singing, all dancing. So there we have it. Thanks everybody for coming. And if you think that this stream has been useful to you, please make sure you let other folks in the Home Studio Trainer group know, and the PreSonus Studio One group, let them know as well. It'd be really great if we could see more people coming along next week. So I'm aiming at the moment to do these once a week. And we'll take it from there. And if they become more popular, we will maybe do it twice a week. Skip says CTC1 is $79.95 US, more flexibility. Also noticed all of the different Melodynes are now listed as well as upgrades. Excellent. So there we go. And he says, thanks, Johnny, good show. All right, folks, thanks a lot for coming. And I will see you tomorrow on the Home Studio Trainer stream with Johnny Geib for Songwriting Thursdays. All right, good night. Cheers.